You are listening to Mainstream Counterculture Influencers. Today's episode is on how off-grid influencers exploit subversive counterculture communities for a mainstream audience. I'm Louison Savarese. I'll be your host today. Today I'm joined by Caden Walden.
Hello.
In this episode, we will be discussing the background behind off-grid influencers and the corporate exploitation and commodification of the counterculture off-grid communities. Off-grid communities are a community of people. There's many different ones who live off the grid, away from electricity and society and internet and all sorts of things. And then, of course, there's a subset of those people who want to share the magic of off-grid living with the world and, of course, kind of become connected again with the world, are influencers. So they post videos, they post Instagram posts, they might make podcasts about their experience in off-grid living, and often use the revenue from that to fund their lifestyle. A quote by Michael O'Regan from Off the Grid and On the Road in Europe, Living in the Age of Uncertainty and Polycrisis. Authors, digital creators, poets, and filmmakers create desire by producing inspiring videos and rich expressions of countercultural imagination on YouTube and Instagram pages. Ignoring the whole influencer part, what types of people do you think tend to go off-grid?
People who want to reconnect with nature. Maybe they want to be self-sufficient, away from other people or communities.
Yeah. There's, of course, people who do it for climate reasons. That's actually a majority of the people who go off-grid. And there's also people who do it to try and get away from the stress of life and reconnect with nature, whether it be temporary or long-term. Generally rich people who become off-grid, either that or you're poor, and then you're like forced to do it because you can't make rent, that kind of thing. There is actually a lot of people who are becoming off-grid because they're joining van life or tiny home life or live in the middle of nowhere life, off-grid life, because they expect, like lots of young people, they expect that they will never be able to own a house ever. Do you think that's a viable alternative? Or do you think there are enough financial benefits to make it worth it? Because if you don't have to pay rent, that's a lot of money.
I don't think that it should ever have to come down to it for people. That shouldn't be the plan to fall back on.
Do you fantasize about that life at all? Do you appreciate the fantasy, the imagination of the wilderness at all?
I mean, yeah, to a certain point, because the society that we know is very material based. So if we could go back to our ancestors' roots and just have a few materials, it would be much more simplistic.
Yeah.
Not a lot to have to stress out about or anything.
Yeah, the one of my papers, The Enchanted North by Emilie, Larson, and Jenny Ingridsdotter, argues that the sense of wilderness is very much in the modern day a cultural commodity, where essentially there is no wilderness anymore. There never really was, because there are humans, there are nomadic peoples everywhere throughout the world, and of course there are extractive industries which, if there is no one to complain that the forests are being cut down, they will cut down the forests. But there are, of course, forests, pristine untouched wildernesses that exist, like the national parks. But those are ultimately a protection by the government and by the middle class. It's a way for the urban lifestyle to escape the city. So there's an obvious impossibility in being an off-grid influencer. Why do you think people don't care?
I feel like some reason could be the kind of suspension of disbelief, whereas like they're living this very unique lifestyle and you want to believe in that lifestyle and you want to be a part of it, but you yourself wouldn't ever go out into the wilderness and live by yourself, but maybe you can live out those fantasies through someone else or something like that.
Yeah, I really like that answer. Could you say that like most influencers are targeting like people who live in these stressful lives and want to fantasize about leaving them but aren't actually able to leave these stressful lives or don't want to?
I would say so, because there are lots of things that tie us to the communities we live in, and people have to work to get paid to pay for their housing, and you can't do that if you just decide to hike in the woods for a month. That doesn't really pay the bills on your house.
Yeah. How do you think they make money? How do they support their lifestyle? Do they support their lifestyle? Are they all rich?
Well, if they're truly trying to be self-sufficient and not trying to rely on outside resources, then maybe they wouldn't be making money in any reasonable fashion. But I think there is a certain amount of money you'd have to be gaining to keep up that lifestyle, to keep up like food and furnishing and stuff like that. And if that's the case, influencing would be a good way to go about it, because you don't have to interact with people in the same way that breaks your off-the-grid immersion.
Yeah. A lot of them have podcasts that they create. They have their Instagram posts, they have their YouTube channels, and all of that is, it's all funneling you to join their Patreon or buy their book or whatever. They're really trying to make you think that they have something to offer. They have valuable insight from their life experience that you need to purchase. So Michael O'Regan also states that there is no doubt that elites seek to capture, appropriate, absorb, or exploit countercultural related imageries, ideas, and practices. From skateboarding to yoga and meditation, the over-commodification of particular practices and even lifestyles have led many to believe the exploitation of counterculture has left only an aesthetic for individual consumption and conformity, even if they are espousing atypical lifestyles. Yeah, I mean, do you think that these influencers are elite in themselves and are exploiting the off-grid lifestyle?
I mean, I don't know any of them personally, but I think it would be something that could be easy to do, because of that whole, like, competition with influencers and the internet. It's all about the next most interesting thing, and if you are going the whole other side of that and experiencing this whole different lifestyle, then it would be very appealing for people to look into and want to live out their fantasies through these people who know that that's what people are doing. They know that people are living their life through the influencers.
Yeah, so they know what they're doing. They know. They may claim that they just want to share their authentic lifestyle and encourage others to join them, but reality, that's not what's happening. They're just sharing a fantasy, manufacturing a fantasy.
I think so.
Well, in today's episode, we've discussed off-the-grid communities, the types of people who make up these communities, the countercultural movements and ideologies behind off-grid living. And we've also been discussing influencers and how they impact the communities and how they exploit these subversive cultures. This has been Louison Savarese.
And Caden Walden.
Thank you for listening. See you in the next episode. This episode was made with help from Caden Walden, Louison Savarese, Adobe Stock Audio,
Music created by Death Guild. Papers and essays written by Michael O'Regan, Emilie Larson, and Jenny Ingridsdotter.